All right, welcome to the first installment of the Winter 2018 UC Santa Barbara Innovator Stories series. I'm John Greathouse, and you can follow me on Twitter at John Greathouse. Our sponsor tonight is Invoca. Invoca connects phone calls and conversations to buyers' digital journeys. So what that translates to, in the old days of the internet, you might go online, you'd see an ad, you'd see something that looked interesting, and then you'd say, I think I'm going to call. You'd pick up the phone and you'd start interacting with someone on the other end, which is fine. The problem with that is the advertiser that paid for that ad that spurred your phone call never gets attribution. And so it's very difficult in that old world to know, well, what ad triggered that phone call? Invoca has solved that problem. So they've connected those digital display ads, those search ads to a phone call, and they allow digital advertisers to drive quality calls into the call center that result in sales. So companies from Mitsubishi to Quicken Loans to OpenTable, there's hundreds of companies that use their technology. They're all using that technology to drive profitable calls into their call center and to ring their cash register. So if you want calls, check out Invoca. Tonight I have Brian Fox with me today. I'm really excited to talk to him. He is a longtime computer programmer. He's really a pioneer in the computer programming field. He's an entrepreneur, he's an author, he's an investor, and he's a free software advocate. Back in the day, Brian authored the Terrapin logo for Apple IIe. That was back in the early 80s. And then he began working with Richard Stallman to help build the Free Software Foundation and Project GNU at MIT. While working with Mr. Stallman, Brian authored a lot of code that's still being utilized to this day. Info, make info, and he contributed heavily to the text info documentation system. His readline and history libraries are still widely used in a variety of applications. But he might be best known for his GNU Bash shell, which runs on, I would say millions, but many millions of computing devices worldwide. And it's everything from Mac OS, so any device that's running Mac OS, to very unusual and vertical and specific devices, such as digital menus at restaurants, devices that run gas station ads, and my favorite is cow milking systems. So if you're into cow milking systems, you have Brian to thank for that success. He also built the first interactive online banking system in the US for Wells Fargo back in the mid-90s, and he created an open source election system back in 2008, and we'll talk about that. He's also a prolific angel investor with a portfolio of companies that includes VWC, RIS, Jamcard, Roaming Messenger, Supply Solution, and Shanghai. He earned his computer science degree from MIT, but what I love about it is, even though it was back in the day, he had the foresight to focus on artificial intelligence. So his emphasis of his computer science degree at MIT was artificial intelligence. And as if that wasn't enough, he's also a very gifted musician. We're very lucky to have Brian as part of our Santa Barbara ecosystem. He gives very freely of his time, events such as this, helping startups when they need advice, all the way from Santa Barbara up to the Bay Area, down to LA. He's definitely a giver, and every great startup community loves their givers. Let's give Brian a very warm welcome to our stage. Thanks again for coming. I really appreciate it.
Why wouldn't I come with an intro like that? I'm like, who is that guy? I want to hang out with him.
I know. I always feel that way, too, when I get introduced. I'm like, really? But I've actually said before that don't sit out in the audience. I mean, Brian is an amazing guy. You're going to learn more about him. But when you hear intros like that, just understand that's that person's greatest hits, right? We don't go over the foibles or the missteps. And so I actually gave a whole talk one time in front of a pretty large group about, they gave my intro, and I said, yeah, that's all true, but, and then I told them all about the in-betweens. Like, in between this and this, there was this, and then there was this. So there's always ups and downs, except for Brian. No downs, right? So one of the themes in your life, and I look at all the different projects you've worked on, it seems like one recurring theme is this idea of freedom. So freedom is something that embodies itself in a lot of the things you've done. What was the inspiration for that? Was it somebody in your family, or is it just in your personality, or what do you attribute that to?
That's a great question, and I think it's true. Freedom of information flow has kind of always been important to me. And growing up in my family, my father's a physicist. And at dinner, we'd sit around the table and we'd have conversations about things, and it was very important to make sure your voice was heard. There were 4 siblings.
You had a large family, right?
There's 4 siblings.
Relatively large.
Yeah. And important to make sure your voice was heard. And so You wanted to make sure that what you said mattered, and so you thought a lot. Everybody in the family did this, not just me. We think a lot about what we wanted to say, and we'd say it. And I was very fortunate to grow up in Brookline, Massachusetts. It had one of the best school systems in the country. And the teachers
Are you a product of public school?
I'm a product of public schools.
So am
Brookline
I.
High School.
So am I.
Let's hear it for Brookline High School. All right, we're done.
You got him to clap. That's good. It's that commanding presence.
Yeah, I can do that.
So I was going to ask you a bit more about your childhood. So I know you were exposed to computers at an early age. You were fortunate.
Yeah.
But you also took advantage of it. A lot of people get that exposure, but they don't take the next step. So what was it like in the Fox household? You said, you had siblings, you had kind of that rivalry to get your voice heard.
Right.
Did your parents encourage entrepreneurial tendencies? Did they encourage your technology thirst? How did that go down?
My dad was a physicist, and so sometimes you would ask a parent to help you with something. You'd say, "Gee, I don't know how to do this." And he'd say, "Well, let me help you do that." My dad would say, "Here's how you do that," and he would kind of do that for everything because he was also very excited about learning and about absorbing new information.
Right.
And we did have a teletype in the basement. He worked for Bolt, Beranek and Newman. He was like employee number 14 or something at the time. And we had a teletype machine in the basement which made lots of clacking noises, and if you held the control key down and hit G, it made a big dinging sound. It says right on the key bell. So I would go down and hit that. I was about 6 years old.
Ringing the
I'd go down
bell.
and hit that. Ring that bell, ring that bell. And so unlike many of the people that were my age, I was exposed to computers from a very young age. So I didn't have that kind of terror that a lot of people our age had, growing up, saying, what if I touch it and I break it?
Exactly.
I was like, let's play with it.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not going to break it. Why did your dad have that in the basement? What was he using it for?
Well, he was at Bolt, Beranek and Newman, and they had the first few teletypes, and he managed to convince someone that he should have it.
To work from home, or?
Not to work, kind of to work from home, not really. He was composing music. And Marvin Minsky was also part of this process, along with another guy. Doesn't matter. But the music was played by running paper tape through the teletype machine.
Wow.
And that generated the actual pitches.
So it's probably some of the earliest electronic music.
It's very early, yeah, early synthesizer.
Wow. He must have been pretty persuasive to get his company to say, yeah, sure, take that very expensive piece of equipment.
Yeah, or he stole it. I
or that. So when I think about that, your early exposure to computers, I mean, you could be a younger person watching this all over the world or sitting here in this audience, and you might say, yeah, well, that's great for Brian. He's older than me, and he had that opportunity. Don't have that attitude. So because there's always new opportunities. So what would you say for kids now? No, they can't go back in time and be in the mid-80s or mid-70s and learn computers, but what can they do right now?
Well, kids, I mean, I'm doing this now. You're right, I'm not a kid anymore.
Right.
But this is what I've done my whole life. I keep trying to find out what's the next thing I'm supposed to do, And right now I'm working on something called the Orchid Protocol. We'll talk about that, I guess, in a little bit.
Yep.
But it has an incentivization based in cryptocurrency. And cryptocurrency, as many of you people know, is, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other cryptocurrencies. This is really the new way of doing decentralized transactions. And I think that is a place where you'll see a lot of innovation. So
we are still going to talk about Orchid, but something I was going to touch upon later. Let's just talk about it right now. So how would a young student process that? What you just said? Okay, great. He's talking about crypto. How would they get closer to what would you suggest they do to get closer to what that really means? And how could they learn and get their hands dirty?
So there are a lot of books out there, and cryptocurrency is not just about technology. It's really about finance, and it's about understanding how commerce and capitalism work. Mm-hmm. So there's a wide range of areas in which and marketing is a heavy part of what's happening right now in cryptocurrency.
Sure.
There's a large number of places where you can kind of get connected up to what's happening with cryptocurrency, and I think that since it's kind of the future of the way finance is going, everyone's going to have to understand what it means to their lives. I mean, your medical records will be there.
Yep.
Your education will be part of cryptocurrency and a ledger.
Yep.
So blockchain, I think, is really
that's where I direct students. So I have this class that I talk about the future of entrepreneurship, and one of the things we talk about, obviously, and every year we talk more about cryptocurrencies. And I feel like understanding blockchain, if I had to pick one or the other, really understanding that and maybe getting involved in it in some way, because it has such a broader application. I mean, blockchain, as you mentioned, is used in medical records. It's going to be used in so many things that need authentication, right? Two-factor authentication or third-party authentication. So anyway, that's my suggestion, is just start reading about this stuff. I listened to a great podcast yesterday about, I think it's called The Crypto Cousins. It's got about 100,000 people that listen to it. And if you just want to learn about what's happening, they interview players. Let me throw one other thing out that I'm very proud of and interested to share. I got a call, actually I got an email on Friday. This is now Tuesday, we're taping this. And one of my students reached out to me. He's looking at a $30 million cryptocurrency transaction. And he was a student probably 4 years ago sitting in this classroom.
Yeah.
And he's saying it's going to be between a $30 and $100 million ICO. And he's about a 25-year-old kid going, I get the tiger by the tail, what do I do here? So if you really want to jump into something big in early stage, I'd say crypto. We'll talk more about Orchid. Yeah. So let's jump back. So I loved it. I even told my wife about your grandfather, who was the artist for the Monopoly Man. So you guys know the Monopoly Man. His nickname is Rich Uncle Pennybags, but he's the guy with the monocle and sort of that archetype of the guy with the top hat. How did that come about? And was he an influence on you when you were growing up? Did you have a relationship with him?
He was an influence on me growing up because he was a spectacular human being. He passed away relatively young. He passed away when I was about 6 years old. I think he was only 60.
Wow.
I can't tell you how it came about that he did that. I mean, I can give you the information.
Was he an artist by trade?
He's a commercial artist, and he would do fine art in his spare time. Yep. I have some of his art in my house. It's quite good. He was well recognized. He had stuff in museums, in fact. But in order to make ends meet, he was a commercial artist, and I think he got paid $50 to draw Mr. Pennybags.
Wow. Yikes.
The Parker Brothers had acquired the game, and they already had a character, but they didn't like the way the character looked, and so he redrew the character, and that became the actual character.
Wow.
And then my cousin really worked hard to make sure that actually came out and got recognized. Nobody was looking for money. They just thought, hey, he drew that thing. That's important.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's funny because when you Google that fact, your cousin did a good job because it is validated all throughout the internet. Every game of Monopoly seems to mention that, which is very cool.
Very cool.
Good for him. So is this your dad's dad, the musician's dad?
This is my dad's dad.
So he was a musician. Your dad was a musician. Your grandfather was an artist.
Was an artist.
That obviously flowed through to you. And I've always thought people that write really great code are artists too, or gamers. I've had the founder of Creative Arts here, and he said he approached gaming as an art and really wanted to reward the game designers as artists.
I think there's a big connection between the types of problem solving that you do in computer science and the creation of music. I think that they're both. I think there's a lot of creative energy in almost anything that's being done, whether it's building a company or writing software. But I think that the connection to music is really strong, and I see it. Marvin Minsky, for example, was one of the best improvisers. He would sit down at the piano. Marvin Minsky was the father of artificial intelligence and the founder of the MIT AI lab. He would sit down at the piano and play pieces that were Bach reminiscent, that he was composing kind of in the moment.
In real time.
Yeah, it was really very interesting.
Wow. And he was coding as well, early coding?
He was definitely an early coder.
Yeah.
He was a mathematician. I think he has 2 PhDs. He's gone now. He had 2 PhDs in math.
Wow.
Solved 2 unsolvable problems. Math is not a young science like computer science.
Yeah, exactly. There's not many unsolvable problems left.
Right.
So we're going to take the first student question in a moment, but just get ready there. So when you were 8, you were involved in this Wally Furzeig experiment with new logo language.
Yeah. So
Tell
my
me
dad.
About that, and then how did that impact what you did later with the Terabin logo language? Or
Kind of, I think.
So what happened with that? What was the story?
So my dad was a both Beranek and Newman, and Wally Furzeig and a couple of other people, Seymour Papert, well known for his educational methods, a whole set of educational methods. They were trying to create a language that would be similar to Lisp, the kind of engineering programming language of the time, similar to that, but that could be used by very young people 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. And they came up with this logo language, which had some of the same properties of this Lisp language, but was easier to understand and easier to read. And they had just kind of completed it, and they needed to test it on somebody, and my dad volunteered me. So I went to work with him and sat down in a room with this teletype that was running this program that they had written in Logo.
Right.
And of course, one of the first things I did was hold down the control key and hit G because I liked the bell to ring. And And for those of you who don't know, Control G is also abort. So the program stopped running immediately. and then I was terrified. Oh no, I broke it, and I tried to make it work, and as I typed things, it would talk back to me. I was talking to Logo.
Oh, wow.
And so I would say, help, and it says, define help. I'm like, define help. And then Wally came running in the room and said, how do you know to type all this stuff? I said, it says to type it right here. It says what to do. Yeah.
Yeah, but you were an outlier. You probably weren't the right person to test that software. Like, let's get this genius of a kid and see how.
I don't think I was a genius, but it was, it was ding, ding, ding. That's not really that genius-like.
Well, you know what I'm saying. Obviously, you proved later in life. I'm sure you were quite bright when you were 8, as well. So then there was coincidentally the Terrapin logo language, and you were still very young, right? Were you in your teens or?
Yeah. So when I was 17, I started programming things on the TRS-80 at the local Radio Shack. It's a little single-piece computer that just come out. And then I was born and raised in Boston.
So you would literally go to the Radio Shack place, or did you buy one?
No, I would go to Radio Shack.
And they just
buy a computer.
And they just let you like hang out and code, or?
Yeah, because they didn't have any demonstration programs, and I was making like little dots appear on the screen, and they were like, "That's cool. That kid's making the computer look like it does something."
So they didn't know how to use it, right?
Nobody knew. Radio Shack used to sell vacuum tubes. You'd bring your vacuum tube in from your broken television set. Your television set, you'd put it in a little thing and
they don't
test
know what
it.
television is.
Yeah, exactly. I heard that earlier.
Yeah. Think YouTube, sort of.
So I went out to California from Boston to play some music, and then I fell asleep while I was playing after about 3 years and decided maybe I should do something else. And I came back to Boston, and I needed some computer time. I wanted to use computers. And I said, is it okay if I use these computers at the school, and I'll help you teach your classes? I asked some grade school people, and they said, sure, teach my math class, and now you're in charge of gifted and talented students doing this computer stuff. So the language that was being taught was Logo at the time, and there were bugs in the software, and it would crash all the time. So one day I was in there literally fixing some bugs in the software, and the owner of the company, the Terrapin company, came in and saw that and said, hey, do you want a job? I said, yes. So that was how I got involved with Terrapin Logo. And then the people I worked with at Terrapin were also students at MIT and the MIT AI Lab. So there was a lot of crossover there.
So that led to all of the work you did at MIT.
That's correct.
So I mean, there's an important story embedded there. And I mean, I am going to get to the first student's question, but there's a very important story embedded in what Brian just said. You see, he put himself out there because he wanted to get close to computers, didn't have access to them otherwise, and he agreed to teach young people in the course of that. And that led to all kinds of great things.
Yeah.
And it's not luck, really. It's not serendipity, really. It's putting yourself in the right situation to have good things happen to you. If you had sat at home and been like bummed out because you didn't have a computer, you wouldn't have had all those opportunities. So put yourself out there, volunteer, ask how you can help. Give first, and then a lot of times it comes back to you. So let's.
Yeah, that's the way I like to say that is get a vision and follow the process. And every step you take, if it's going in that direction, it's the right step. And if it's going away from there, don't take it. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
And otherwise you get stuck in a side rut. Hey, this is a great job. I'm doing marketing. Really? I thought you wanted to be a computer scientist.
Yeah.
So.
Right. And time goes like that. You think you're doing it for 6 months, and 2 years later you wake up.
I still think I'm 19.
You look 19, so we'll take the first question.
What moment during your professional career drove you to entrepreneurship, since you already experienced a lot of success with companies like Wells Fargo, or was it something that you always had in mind?
I'm a terrible employee. So if anybody,
Me too.
If anybody wants to hire me, I advise you against it. That's actually the truth. I'm not a very good employee. I see solutions to people say, we have this horrible problem, and here's the solution. I'm like, here's another solution. And they're like, well, we wanted to do it this way. I'm like, yeah, really? I just don't work that well in those circumstances. And so I've been consulting since I was 20 years old.
Yeah, I mean, you
and the Wells Fargo thing, I was a consultant to Wells Fargo. We built Wells Fargo's online banking. The first prototype was done in 3 months. We didn't do the kind of standard thing where people want to make sure they have their jobs and it looks a certain way. And I wreaked havoc in there. It was bad.
Yeah. But you've been an entrepreneur really your whole life, your whole professional life.
Yes, that's correct.
And I think that's one of the things a lot of folks that are younger need to figure out is, look, it's sexy now, and there's all these movies about it, and there's nothing sexy about being an entrepreneur. It's a lot of hard work. It's brutal. Terrible. You don't know where your next paycheck's coming from. It makes much more sense just to get a job, right? I mean, you get a paycheck, you can go home, you don't have to worry about it.
Klaus Schauser said, "Hey, Brian, do you want to work with me and John at this brand new company we're starting up?" I said, no, I'm going to do my own thing.
You wouldn't have made anybody.
Yeah, that's happened countless. There are the number of opportunities that I did not just take the straight road and say, hey, financial success is pretty large, pretty large. But there's also been some successes along the way.
Of course, and I would say the fact that you followed your passion and your heart and really understood early on that I'm not a good employee, therefore why put myself or my employer in that position?
It's not good for the employer.
Yeah. So self-awareness is really, really the key. Get that self-awareness as early as you can. You're going to be happier, no doubt about it. So I'm going to ask you about shell shock. That was only about 3 years ago. So, well, you can describe it better than I can. So were you surprised, and what were you kind of almost proud? Like, wow, somebody hacked my code. Like all those years later. I mean,
no, I still think it's hysterically funny. So I wrote the bash shell before there was an internet, and then 27 years later, somebody said, "Oh, there's a bug if you use the bash shell as an internet server." There's a bug, and it could wreak havoc on the internet.
Why didn't you anticipate that?
And then I was specifically asked. The New York Times called me up, and they said to me specifically, "Why didn't you anticipate that?"
Oh, come on.
And I said, "Aha! My plan worked."
Yeah, that's right. Right. It only took 27 years.
Exactly.
You had that long vision.
Exactly, because everybody knows their software that you write when you're in your 20s will be used for 27 years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's going to be in millions of
There's
devices.
tons of pieces of software out there that are 27 years old.
Right. Used every day by millions of people.
That's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
exactly. That's
can't
why when I read about that, I thought that's got to be like a badge of pride. Like, who else would have their software hacked after 27
Okay, so I will tell you about the badge of pride. So there's an award called the Pony Awards, and it's spelled PWNY. PWN is a acronym, not an acronym, a word that means to take over and control somebody else's computer. And so the Pony people give you an award for the best bug that somebody has found, or the most heinous bug, or whatever. So a friend of mine was at these awards, and they said, we now are going to give an award for the most overrated bug this year, and it was shell shock. And then they said, does anybody here, work with the guy? And then my friend said, okay, fine. So I now have in my office I look like a, what do they call those, the brony guys?
Yeah.
I have a little horsey thing in my office now, but that's the Pony Award. I'm very proud of that.
You should be. Yeah. Very good for you.
Most overrated bug.
We'll take the next student's question.
So from your involvement with ORCID Protocol and the National Association of Voting Officials, it's evident that you really like to combine your work with your passions. So my question is, how important is social activism to you, and how did you decide to get involved with free and uncensored internet usage?
How did I decide to get involved with Luch? I'm sorry.
With free and uncensored internet usage.
Well, I feel like I've been involved with free and uncensored information sharing, certainly since my early 20s. And ORCID is something brand new that I and 4 other co-founders are working on. It's not a replacement. It's a new internet. The existing internet right now, all your information flows through central locations. The infrastructure is controlled by Cox and Time Warner and BBN Planet. And as an end result, these organizations know your name, your address, your phone number, your social security number, your credit card, and every single website that you're going to. And now, with the change that's been taking places with net neutrality and privacy laws, these organizations can sell that information, not even just in aggregate, but specifically. Somebody could buy, in the future, John Greathouse's browsing history.
It's really exciting.
And incognito mode doesn't help. So,
Oops.
So that really bothers us. And one of the things we thought we could do is not have all the information flow in the clear through all these central points, but instead bounce from place to place. So instead of me going from my house straight to Cox, I kind of go from my house to John's house, although I don't know I'm going to John's house because it's anonymous, and then it goes from John's house to Alex's house, and then it goes from Alex's house to Wikipedia. And that matters a lot if I'm, for example, a Chinese national living in China, and I want to simply see a Facebook page or a Wikipedia page, and I'm being blocked by the the Great Firewall of China.
Right.
This is the type of technology that could help you circumvent that,
So
so that you can do simple information sharing.
And I'm going to confess my ignorance here. It's easy for me to do that. How do people use Orchid? I haven't used it. Is it just as simple as going to? Do I have to download a new browser? What do I have to do?
So we're still in the process of building it.
Okay.
The alpha.
But
does
now I don't
exist.
feel so bad about not using it.
The alpha does exist, and the way it presents is pretty simple. You download something called Orchid, and then you turn it on, and when it's on, you're using it, and when it's off, you're not. So.
So you can use any browser.
You can use any browser. It modifies the way your internet is routed.
So it's controlling where that
Right.
ISP address is essentially versus being its own browser and being
Right.
sort of its own siloed off part of the internet.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Oh, okay, good.
And there's a cryptocurrency component, a blockchain component to this, which is that why is John going to let me use his internet connection? Well, it's because I'm paying him, and I'm paying him anonymously, and he's receiving those that payment. So everybody who helps me to do what I need to do on the internet or using this new internet platform gets paid by the money that I put out there.
So if I join Orchid and don't ever turn it on, I'm going to get paid because other people are going to be using my node or my ISP.
That's correct. If you turn yourself on as a relay,
Right.
but you don't necessarily use your computer to do browsing,
Right.
and in fact, I'll tell you about something, all entrepreneurs should think about this. If you do that, then you'll be earning these tokens. They're called Orchid tokens.
Do they convert into cryptocurrency?
Well, they are cryptocurrency,
Okay.
and so they can be traded, not today, but soon. They can be traded on the cryptocurrency exchanges, and of course, you can convert them from crypto into fiat, so dollars or euros or whatever, what have you. The thing that you're describing, we think, is going to be so important to the success of Orchid that we're building I'm personally building a very small version of Orchid that can be placed into a device that we call the Orchid Egg. You pick up this Orchid Egg at Starbucks or maybe at Target. Maybe somebody gave it to you or you bought it. Either one doesn't matter. You plug it into your wall, configure it with your phone, forget about it. Now you're helping this new internet. You're helping people around the world get to places that they couldn't get to before. And we have some controls built into the protocol. So if you are providing services for somebody to go out to the internet, you might say, I don't want somebody to go to kittyporn.com or buyheroin.com.
Oh,
and so you can.
Is there a buy heroin? No, I'm kidding. Don't look that up. So you can control it you can control where your node can go.
You can have a whitelist and say only these locations are allowed. So somebody might be extremely restrictive and say Wikipedia, Facebook, and Twitter, and that's it.
Got it.
And they probably won't be able to charge as much for that
Right.
service because they're
Not getting
limited
as much
access to the
usage,
internet.
yeah.
And somebody in Sweden might say, I'm for free speech in every way, shape, and form, and you can go to any website you want to.
So is that going to allow people in China to get around the firewall there?
Well, don't hold me to this, but yes.
Okay. Wow. You heard it first. You're going to be getting a call from Chinese officials in about 10 minutes. Sorry about that. So we talked a little bit about cryptocurrency before. There's been a lot of fluctuation in the market lately. I think that's kind of to be expected. We've had fluctuation in the stock market lately. It always makes the news. Sort of the outliers always make the news. But what's your long-term view on the currencies themselves? And are you placing a mental bet or even a financial bet on any particular? Like, is it Bitcoin or is it Ethereum? Is there one that you really, really think is the winner? I know we both agree that technology is gonna win.
Yeah. So I think the technology is going to win. This is very early on
Yes.
in this technology to think that we had Alta Vista before we had Google.
Right.
And Alta Vista was a great idea.
Yeah.
And Google had better execution, and they did some things better, and now Google's the big winner in the centralized search space.
We had GeoCities before we had MySpace, before we had Friendster, before we had
Exactly.
Facebook. Yeah.
Exactly. So I don't personally think that Bitcoin is the cryptocurrency, and I don't think Ethereum, which has many benefits and advantages over Bitcoin, is the cryptocurrency.
Right.
And Dfinity, which probably nobody's heard of, which is the next one after Ethereum, built by the same types of people, that one's great too, but I don't think it's the final one. So my view on crypto is crypto at large is really important. As I said before, I think it's going to take over everything.
Yep.
And I think that it's important that people pay enough attention to crypto to kind of understand how it works, not the deep nitty-gritty details. You don't need to know how the fuel injector in your car works, right?
Yeah, right.
But to know how crypto is being used and what makes money work in this sense. It's a very interesting thing, finance.
So, are the crypto is the crypto community using Orchid? Are they an early adopter of Orchid, or have you targeted them as a community? Have they come to you, or have you gone to them?
The crypto community loves Orchid. We don't stop receiving requests for more information about it. To kind of put this in perspective, I think that there's about 40,000 individuals that invest into ICOs. You would think that there's hundreds of millions, but there's not. It's about 40,000.
Right.
And that represents billions and billions of dollars, right? We have over 50,000 requests on our website. So we've definitely kind of got the attention of the crypto community,
Right.
which I think is good.
So ICOs are sort of the crypto equivalent to an IPO, or initial public offering. It's a way to raise money, in this case cryptocurrency, typically for other crypto startups. We'll take the next student's question.
You worked in numerous different industries, from banking to politics, creating the first web-based banking program to an open source election system. What is your favorite industry to collaborate with, and why?
It's a great question. I prefer to collaborate with people-oriented organizations. So something that actually affects people's lives, not just their financial success, but kind of anything that's more widespread. I like to be in a position, I like to be able to help people, if possible. And that sounds really weird, but it's kind of true. You know, instead of building a bowling alley, I'd rather build food kitchens. So I'm actually there's a company that I'm invested in right now that it's all about feeding hungry people. That's what it does. It doesn't do anything else. And we're using technology to kind of understand more about what we need to do to feed those people and to connect people who want to help with that process into that process.
So you're an investor in that company?
I'm an investor in that company. My organization, Opus Logica, does technology investing. So we're like a venture technologist. Sometimes we put in capital, but mostly we put in technology.
Are you looking for a double bottom line there, where you want a financial return and a social return? Or are you saying, I really just want the social return?
I need the financial return in order to allow me to keep doing the social return, and also to get people involved. We need to say, look, this is great for the world. A friend of mine came to me, a friend of mine who you might know, Jonathan Siegel.
Yeah.
Jonathan Siegel came to me a long time ago, and he said, I want to work with you, I'm doing this thing. And we said, okay, we're going to interview you. And I said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he says, without any hesitation, a philanthropist. And I thought, that's the best answer I've ever heard.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, be in a position to help others. Make sure, put your own mask on first before you put on the next mask.
Right. And what's funny about that, if it's a younger person might hear that and think, well, okay, well, I'll think about that in 30 years. But you can be a philanthropist with your time right now.
He was 28 when he said that.
Yeah, so it's not always about writing a check.
Right.
It's about, maybe in your case, adding some technical expertise into the equation, maybe some hardware expertise, maybe it is writing a check, maybe it's your time. It can be all of those things. But it's not just right. We always think of, the Monopoly guy with the monocle writing a big check.
Yep.
But that's really that's the top of the pyramid of the people that have extreme amounts of money. There's a lot of other roads besides that. Well, good for you. Well, it shows in all of your stuff. I mean, going all the way back to GNU and the free aspect of software, and making sure that there's accountability in the software writing. That's one thing I really liked about it. I heard you say that before, and you were talking about the private versus public, and one of the aspects of the public software, or free software, open software, that you like is that real accountability of, hey, it's one thing to write code in the back room of a company that only the people at your company will see, and they probably won't see it because it's source code and it'll get compiled, versus, oh shoot, here's my code and millions of people are probably going to read this. And
yeah, every peer on the planet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That results in better code, right? It results in
much better code. It's very interesting to me. I mean, it's now they're all ingrained habits. There's no laziness in my code writing.
Right.
There's never a place where I go, I'll finish that later. It's always, oh, this has to be right. This has to be the right way to do it, and I have to think about it that way. And that's I think that's good. I think it really creates quality.
How
and I
can-
expect quality in others.
Exactly. Well, it's that accountability to your
Yeah.
peers. How can young people? Not everyone in this room or listening is a coder or wants to be a software coder, but the ones that have that proclivity, what can they do right now to get involved in the open source community? What would you suggest?
Open source is really easy. Free software is really easy to get involved in. Find your own itch and scratch it is kind of the core thing there. But if you just want to get your feet wet, you're scared, right? There's titans of industry out there doing stuff. Linus Torvalds is writing crawl. How am I supposed to do something in there?
Right.
There's always something that needs to be done. And the simplest thing, it doesn't have to be complicated, the simplest thing is the best way to get started. So you see that this front page needs to be translated into another language. Do the translation.
Right.
Write the code for that. Say, hey, I've done the translation, or I found some misspellings in your code, and here are the changes for that. And as soon as you start getting accepted, and you realize that this is you're part of a community doing things, you can start doing more and more things in these. There are hundreds of thousands of projects out there that need help.
Right.
And there's hundreds of thousands of projects waiting to get started by everybody who's interested in open source and getting involved.
And it's all about work product today when you're getting hired, right? You said, like, when I was back in my day, it was a resume and try to be glib in the interview.
That's right.
But now it's like, well, what have you done?
Yeah,
So if you can say, well, I've contributed to this open source community and my code's been accepted by this group and I'm still learning, or if you're a writer and you say, look, I've written these blogs, a travel blog when I was in college, whatever it is, it's a work product that someone that's thinking about hiring you can evaluate as opposed to looking at you across the table and wondering if maybe you'll be a good employee.
That's correct.
So come into these job conversations with work product,
Yep.
including when you go talk to the local. Give them something concrete. So I want to ask you two questions, a couple questions about music, because I love music. I'm not a musician. I've managed a band and I've always been on the fringes, but I can't play anything other than the radio. So they know what a radio is. I didn't think they would.
Yeah. It's an app on your phone.
Has music, can you think of how music has impacted your startup or your entrepreneurial life? Are there lessons, like you're an amazing bass player, I'm sure you play other instruments. Was it the discipline to learn? Were there lessons you can draw into your startup world?
For a long time in my life, I kept my music separate from my computer world because I wanted to be respected in the computer world as a computer programmer, and I wanted to be respected in the music world as a musician. And if you nowadays, right, I wrote Bash, so if I go somewhere to play music and it says Brian Fox, the author of Bash, is playing, all these techies show up and they don't really care about the music. So I really tried to keep them separate, but more recently, in the last 10 years or so, I've really started to kind of put those things together, and it's been exciting. I mean, I'm able to take. So my approach to building a business is what I did when I built my first band and made albums, and that was important to me. And my approach to open source collaboration, that shows up in my musical collaborations. And I think the other thing that really works well is in order to play well with others, you have to listen. It's not about the production as much as the consumption. You really have to listen to what's happening around you. And I think that's also true if you're going to work with others inside of an organization or a company, or if you want somebody to invest in you, you should listen to what they have to say.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you don't have your own mind and you have your own idea of where you're going, but there's a lot of valuable information available in the sharing of information and collaboration.
Yep, and overlying that has to be mutual respect.
Right.
Right, I can listen,
100%.
and if I don't respect you, it's not going to really help either of us. And so you got to put yourself in a position with musicians that you respect
Exactly.
and that you're learning from.
Exactly.
And they should be hopefully learning from you as well.
Yep.
I think that's really where the magic happens. So this is a little off the wall question, maybe a little random, but and we'll get to the next question after this. So when I like to write, I'm not the world's greatest writer, but I enjoy the process. So sometimes when I'm just really, really in the groove and just enjoying the process and feel like the work product is pretty good, it's often when I'm listening to instrumental music. So and it'll be slack key sometimes for Hawaiian music. Sometimes it's Scott Joplin, doing it's just ragtime. It differs, but it's that same feeling. And I almost feel like I'm typing. I'm not, but I almost feel like I'm typing in tune with the music.
Right.
Do you listen to music when you code, and if so, what do you listen to?
Yeah. No, I
Really?
No.
Dude, I had that whole big build-up.
I have. It's beautiful, and I'm really thrilled actually that you do that. It's fantastic.
You do it in silence.
I'm one of the guys that needs silence. A lot of programmers listen to music while they program, and it works for them almost in the same way as you described. They kind of get into a zone, and then the rest of it just happens magically. That's not so true for me. And
you're a musician. That shocks
well,
me.
I have this embarrassing truth about being a musician. If you put a bass in my hands and I start playing a groove, you can talk to me all you want, but I sound like a moron. So you can say anything you want, and the information will go in, but my response will be like, it's almost impossible for me to produce verbally while I'm producing musically. It's very interesting. So sometimes at one point in my life, I was singing pop music while I was playing the bass. I was capable of doing that, but I really didn't know what I was singing. I'd get the words wrong.
Right.
It's pretty funny, yeah.
I've always admired that with just watching somebody on stage that can sing and play. It's like, what's going on in that brain?
It's interesting.
Magical.
People have that special. I don't have it.
I don't either, sadly. We'll take the next question.
What was your inspiration behind creating the first online banking system for Wells Fargo?
For the money, yeah.
Go to the bank for the money.
A friend of mine, I'll tell you the 100% true story. This guy that I used to work with had started working for the bank, and he said, "It's awesome. We're going to build this online banking system. It's going to be the world's greatest thing." And I had just come back from Japan, where I had built a head-eye system that watched the ball bounce around a room, right? And I was going to just play music for a while. And I just come back, and I was still in Santa Barbara, and he's in the Bay Area. He says, "Come up here and do this thing." And I said, "No, I don't want to. I just want to play music." He says, "Come on." I said, "No." He says, "We'll fly you up. You can hang out at the house for the weekend. We'll go party. It'll be great." I said, "Fine. I'll do your timeshare sales thing in order to hang out with you." So I go in for the interview, and then the woman who interviewed me was the non-listener. She was a non-listener, and she just had decided she was going to hire me no matter what. And I was not happy. I didn't want to be there. I was surrounded by the bank, and people were wearing ties. I was not happy. And she said, "So what's your usual rate?" So I just tripled my usual rate. And she said, "Okay." And then I realized two things right away. The first thing is, there are some things I will do for money. Right?
Sure.
And the second thing was, man, have I been charging way too low.
Right. Should have said 4 times your rate.
Exactly. So I ended up taking that gig, and then, I swear to God, this is the truth. The guy that brought me up there went on vacation for 3 months.
Wow. Bait and switch. Wow.
I was like, that's cool. So then I started bowling the China shopping around inside the bank, and it's a very political situation inside these larger organizations. And the guy that was sponsoring this whole project was he was pretty on edge, because if it didn't work, he was going to be gone. He's a senior VP.
Yeah, he's out.
And I'm walking up to the database guy going, "Give me access to the banking information." So I learned a lot of lessons, but yeah.
But now that it's over, it's a nice feather in your cap. I mean, it was early in that
very interesting.
industry's life,
and I learned a lot. I mean, I was like, wow, there are no good tools for doing this kind of website.
Right.
And so then in August of that year, I built a tool for doing that.
Oh, nice.
So it's good.
Good. So you made some
So that's
money.
my inspiration.
Hey, occasionally in life, sometimes it's okay to have
It's
that.
all right.
It shouldn't be your sole motivation, that's for sure.
Right.
You'll never be happy if that's the case.
That's right.
So tell me about Meta HTML. Was that in that same period that Linda was doing her book, and is this mid-90s? What was going on?
So it was around that same period.
And sorry, that casual reference. Linda started lynda.com. It was purchased by LinkedIn for $1.3 billion or something.
Linda
She
Wine.
wrote one of the first books on HTML programming.
Yeah. So what had happened was I was working at the bank, and we're writing software in C and C++, and then the designer comes over and says, "Gee, it would be better if that thing was 2 points darker." And then you'd go into your C++ program and change a number.
Right.
It was very painful, and I thought, this whole thing is crazy. This is not the way people should do.
So there was no HTML editors or anything like that.
There was no HTML editors. There was nothing like that.
Right.
And in addition to that, the browsers were all different. Some browsers supported tables, other browsers did not.
Right.
Like even that simple kind of thing.
So and what would that mean? It would render on some computers and not on others?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it would be impossible. You couldn't have something that just worked across a bunch of browsers.
Right.
So I thought about that for a while, and then I realized, I could write a language that's kind of scheme-like and looks like HTML. So you could just write HTML, but you'd be able to do things like loop over stuff or open up a connection to a database and get some data and then stuff it into the page. All the things that you would do today in Ruby on Rails or even in PHP. But at that time, there was nothing like that.
Did you commercialize that, or you just put it out there for the world? What did you do?
So I tried. So this is all 1995. In August, we wrote that thing, and then Henry Minsky, Marvin Minsky's son, and Julie Minsky, the twin sister, and I started a company, along with Mike Fredkin, to basically called Universal Access. We got the domain UA.com.
Ah, did you sell it?
We did.
Nice.
We did about 6 years ago.
Sweet.
Yeah, it was good.
Did United Artists buy it? Or?
No.
No.
But it worked out. It was a good investment.
Good.
Yeah. We made more money off the domain name than we ever made doing any business. Yeah. But we built this company, Universal Access, to sell this tool because everybody was trying to, it's the mid-90s, everybody wants to do the thing. And 2 or 3 companies that I know very well made hundreds of millions of dollars using this to rapidly build their thing, and then I used it to build something later. But the company wasn't very good. We were kind of green and weren't that smart about how to run a company. I didn't listen as well in meetings as I should have, and I learned that lesson. Sometimes you learn these things.
Right. Well, good.
Yeah.
So let's jump way forward. So from the mid '90s to 07. So 07, you got involved in the open source voting system.
Yeah.
I'd love to just hear your general thoughts on why you think that's an important issue. I mean, I think we all have our own ideas why you might feel that way, and then I'd also like to hear who is really fighting that, because it sounds like just to make sense. There's always constituents that are going to fight something, right? So just your overall thoughts on why you think that's an important thing for you to put your time into, and then who's really behind it not happening quickly.
In a society that is even partially democratic, like our republic, the votes should be counted as cast, 100%. And I believe that the only way that can happen is if the entire process for how you vote and how they get counted and the chain of custody of the votes and all that is completely transparent and easily understood. If you're using proprietary software, that's a black box. And even here in Santa Barbara, you fill out a paper ballot and then you walk over to a machine and they slide it into a black box.
Literally
made by Diebold, and some software says, oh, don't worry, I counted your vote exactly the way you cast it. And you don't know whether that's true. And that could be false because somebody's malicious, right? It could be false because somebody made a mistake. It could be false because that programmer came in that day and he had a hangover and he just pasted something from somewhere else and made a mistake in a variable name, and nobody knows. It's all proprietary code, and the number of people that can check that code and validate that it's good is the number of people that are paid by a proprietary company, which is vanishingly small compared to the number of people that exist in the world that could look at the code on GitHub.
And what incentive does a company that sells those machines to local municipalities have to say, oh, guess what? We made a mistake and it's caused 5 elections to be wrong? I mean, they have no incentive to disclose anything that might have been wrong.
I will not use this platform to get into a deep discussion, but I will say that there is a website you can go to called myvoteismine.org, and there is a 7-minute video there that describes in great detail the types of issues that you might have seen in the 2016 election, and there's a pile of information about that and how that could be related to the election systems that were used. And had we had open source election systems, completely transparent election systems, I think that the United States, the people of the United States would be much more confident in the outcome of the election.
So I think most of us would agree that we're eventually going to get to that point, but it's going to take a while. So other than the people that make the machines, I understand they wouldn't want it. Who else is fighting it? Are the politicians fighting it? Is it?
Politicians aren't fighting it except as they're being lobbied by the people who have lots of money that don't, that make those machines because there's money in selling these machines. I don't know that there's a, secret cabal of people who like to have a bunch of machines out there that they can control and modify the vote. I'm not.
Yeah, I don't believe in cabals.
But
I do believe in people wanting to protect their own bacon.
I think that happens a lot.
Yeah.
Like that happens a lot. So I think that all the people in Congress who are voting against this, or who are saying it's okay, that proprietary company can simply let somebody look at the code, and that's kind of like it's open source. That's not the same thing. It doesn't have the same results.
So
it also keeps the cost of our elections very high. We could reduce
Who
the
benefits by that,
the,
or from that?
the proprietary companies producing election systems.
Right.
The taxpayer loses.
Are the politicians saying, excuse me, we agree that it makes sense, but we want to study it more? I mean, that's kind of one of their tactics, right? Is to kick the can down the road. And
The number of I've had the privilege of discussing this with some sitting senators, and they're experts, and some of their experts are truly experts in software. And then you realize that if it's open source, tens of thousands of eyeballs can be looking at that, and that can be better for security.
it's like blockchain in that regard, right?
And they say, well, they might find the bugs and exploit them. And if it's a secret, maybe they won't find the bugs. And then I point out, only the good guys won't look at your software if you keep it proprietary. The bad guys are still going to hack into your systems and look at that software, find the bugs and exploit them. And in fact, that's what happens. That's why Russia was able to get into our voting systems. We didn't have some nice guy. I didn't hack our voting systems.
Right. Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I can understand that concern, but it seems like when you explain it, that they would see that side of it too.
I keep trying. You can try too.
Well, part of it's inertia too. I just think change is scary, and it's this idea of what if we make this change under my watch and something happens, I'm going to look bad as a politician. I think all those things are happening. It will happen. I mean,
I hope so.
The folks in here, their children are going to be voting on their smartphone and go, really? You guys waited in line? Like, hold on. Okay, I voted. Yeah. But it's going to take a bit longer.
Yes.
We'll take one more student question.
Graduating from such a prestigious school, was there more opportunities for you to do what you truly were passionate about, in the sense of having more resources or in having more doors open because you graduated from MIT? And what are your habits that made you so successful?
So to clarify, I did not graduate from MIT. Okay, so I want to make sure that's kind of clear. But yes, the time I spent at MIT and the relationships that I made at MIT have been the stepping stones for almost all the important things I've done in my life. I traveled around the world. In the 90s, I spent the entire 90s basically traveling around the world and doing different things because of the people I knew at MIT. And I would say, hey, where are you now? Oh, you're in Japan? I'll come live in Japan for 3 months. Oh, where are you? You're in France? I'll go to France. And it was those relationships with those very smart people.
Right.
And the fact that they had a chance to work with me in a situation that was like at school, that was very important. So yeah, I think the relationships that you make in school are extremely important.
And I think it's this idea of curating your peer group, right? I mean, that doesn't mean you have to be Machiavellian about your friends. You can have just friends just for the sake of having friends. But you want to make sure, especially professionally, you start curating those people that you hang out with professionally. And again, that you're learning from them, that you can help them, and then hopefully in turn they can help you at some point.
I think it's important that you have the relationship with each person that you know that is appropriate to have with that person. So not every person I meet is my girlfriend.
Right.
Hopefully. And not every person I meet is my business partner. But hopefully there are
Right.
some people who fall into the business partner category.
Yep. So you're obviously extremely shy and withdrawn.
I have that problem, yeah.
So
I'm
you're
also a fitness expert. Why are you laughing? Thank you.
it must be the light.
TV puts on 100 pounds.
So have you always been this way? Because I mean, a lot of tech folks aren't quite as gregarious or humorous as you. Is this something you developed? And
No, I'm just a loudmouth, man.
well, come on, man, give me something here. Is there any advice you can give to folks? Because that's one thing I've noticed is young people, there's kind of two camps. There are the folks that have no fear and they'll talk to anybody about anything. And they're a smaller camp than the other kids that feel like, well, I don't know. You did say that you grew up in a family where you had to be a little aggressive to have your voice heard. That might have helped. But do you have? Is there anything?
Also to get more chicken.
To get more food, right? Got to be quick. I mean, I always recommend Toastmasters for people to present. Get up and present, and especially if you're uncomfortable, you don't like it. Anything that makes you uncomfortable and you don't like to do, that will help you grow. Doing the things you're really comfortable doing over and over again don't help you.
That's true. I agree with that 100%. That you shouldn't. I think it's really interesting. My advice is kind of get out of yourself. You know, people who kind of are extremely self-conscious. One thing they might want to think about is maybe everybody else isn't really thinking about you.
Exactly.
Right? And so it's okay to be a little bit self-conscious. Oh, I have a pimple today. I'm not happy about that. Whatever. But if you're focused on achieving a result, you know, then you kind of leave yourself behind. You know, it's like when you're having a conversation with your best friend, you don't think about what your hair looks like. You just talk to your friend. And that can really be true, I think, in most conversations or even in a forum like this.
Right.
You're just kind of interested in getting the information out.
And it really, really resonates what you said as well about not everyone's thinking about you. I think that's also somewhat when you're younger, a little bit, you're a bit more self-conscious. But really, the world's got other things on their mind other than what your hair looks like today. So let me end with this one. So you've obviously had a very storied career. I did laugh when you said, sorry, back up, when you said that when your build is the GNU guy, and all these techie people show up. I just want to see what that audience looks like, right? He's playing music, and they're all like, "Could I ask you about the code?"
Yeah, that's what it's like.
So of all your professional accomplishments, which one are you most proud of, and which one do you think will have the biggest impact? And maybe you haven't done it yet.
Wow. Yeah. So those are two different things. So I've had the good fortune to play music with Ronnie Laws, who's a well-known musician, and I'm proud that I was able to accomplish that in the same context as I'm able to do this computer science thing. I'm also proud of the work I did at the Free Software Foundation, but not as much of the Bash shell as of these other tools I wrote, this readline library and history library. It's kind of the way people interact on a command line with everything now. And it's not just for shells, it's for anything you type at. So I'm kind of proud of that. But my biggest accomplishment is my children.
Awesome.
There's just nothing more great than having been nearby while they became the people that they are.
Right. That's wonderful. What a wonderful note to end on. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah. Thank you.